The morning sun hit the driveway in soft, golden streaks, warming my back as I knelt by the front tire of my old sedan. Soap bubbles clung stubbornly to the paint, reflecting tiny fragments of the sky, and I worked methodically, almost meditatively, letting the rhythm of the sponge scrub my worries away. There was something comforting about the repetitive motion, the smell of soap mixed with warm asphalt, the occasional breeze carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass. I'd chosen this Saturday for a simple reason: to escape the noise of everything else, even if just for an hour. The music from my phone, soft acoustic guitar, played in the background, filling the space between me and the quiet neighborhood. I hummed along quietly, lost in the way the sunlight flickered on the water-soaked paint. I was entirely absorbed in the small task of making the car shine when I heard the voice. It wasn't harsh or commanding. It was soft, teasing, and unexpected. "You missed a spot." I froze, sponge halfway through a circular motion. My mind scrambled. Did I leave a streak somewhere? I glanced up, expecting maybe a neighbor or a passerby, and then I saw her. She was leaning lightly on the edge of my car hood, coffee cup in hand, the morning sun catching the soft highlights in her hair. She looked effortless, poised, confident, but with an ease that made her approachable. The faint crease near her eyes softened her sharp elegance, and the quiet warmth in her gaze made me acutely aware of every little detail I hadn't noticed about her before. She wasn't just a person stepping into my quiet morning. She was a presence that altered it. For a moment, I felt my cheeks heat, unsure whether to laugh or apologize for some imagined imperfection in my work. She tilted her head slightly, and the hint of a smile tugged at the corner of her lips, playful yet steady, as if she already knew the effect she had. The air between us felt different, charged in a subtle, almost imperceptible way. The breeze carried the faint aroma of her perfume, mingling with the soap on my hands, and for the briefest second, I was hyper-aware of the warmth on my skin, the way the sun struck her face, and the rhythm of her breathing as she waited for me to respond. My sponge felt heavier in my hands, my movements slower, as if my body realized I wasn't just washing a car anymore. I cleared my throat, trying to regain my composure, and forced a small laugh. "I missed a spot, huh?" My voice sounded casual, but my heart beat a little faster, an unsteady rhythm that contradicted the serene morning. She nodded, still smiling, a teasing gleam in her eyes. And then she pointed, not at the car, but at herself. It was a simple gesture, and yet it struck me like an electric current. In that moment, the ordinary Saturday, the mundane chore of washing a car, transformed into something charged with curiosity, tension, and a quiet, undeniable pull. The day had just begun, but already, it felt as if nothing would ever be quite the same again. Her finger pointed at herself again, subtle yet deliberate, and I couldn't help the laugh that escaped me this time. Half amusement, half disbelief at how suddenly ordinary moments could become charged with an unfamiliar tension. The morning sun glinted on her hair, highlighting soft streaks of gold, and for some reason, the sight of her leaning against my car made the air feel warmer, heavier, like it was holding its breath along with me. You mean you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My fingers gripped the sponge tighter than necessary, the water soapy and slick beneath my palms, but I barely noticed. She nodded slowly, her smile widening just enough to tease me without revealing too much. It wasn't overt, nothing that could be mistaken for forwardness, but there was a confidence in her gaze that felt daring, like she had silently invited me into this playful exchange, and now it was up to me to step forward. She took a small step closer, and I noticed the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air around her, mingling with the warm, soapy smell of my car. It was intoxicatingly ordinary, somehow, the way a smell could anchor you to a moment, making it linger in your memory. I became acutely aware of every movement she made, the casual bend of her arm, the way her weight shifted onto one leg, the quiet sway of her posture that somehow made her seem both approachable and untouchably graceful at the same time. "Maybe you need a different kind of polish," she said softly, tilting her head as her eyes flicked up to meet mine. The tease in her voice was light, playful, but it carried a weight that made my chest tighten. Her words weren't bold, weren't flirtatious in a reckless way, but they made me pause, making me conscious of my own reactions. The sudden awareness of how quickly my pulse had sped up, how my hands itched to brush against hers, how my words seemed clumsy compared to the effortless way she carried herself. I cleared my throat and smiled, leaning slightly on the car to regain some composure. I guess I'm going to need a lot of practice then. My voice sounded steadier than I felt, though I could feel the faint blush creeping up my neck. She laughed quietly, a sound that seemed to settle into the spaces between us, warm and lingering. "Maybe," she said, "or maybe you just need someone to guide you." Her finger brushed along the edge of the hood as she gestured, but her gaze stayed locked on mine, lingering, testing, drawing me in. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just a casual Saturday encounter. It was something different, a small, delicate spark of connection that demanded attention. My mind scrambled to analyze, rationalize, and yet all I could focus on was the warmth of her presence, the subtle playfulness in her gestures, the way the sunlight caught her features and made every minor detail of her seem significant. For the first time that morning, I felt truly unmoored, caught between the mundane chore of washing a car and the magnetic pull of her proximity. The tension was quiet, almost imperceptible, but it hummed in the air like electricity before a storm, and I knew, even without saying anything, that this teasing remark, this small invitation, had shifted everything. Her laugh lingered in the air, soft and warm, wrapping around the hum of my old car engine and the distant rustle of leaves. It was the kind of sound that made a simple Saturday morning feel suspended, as if the world had softened just enough to hold the two of us in its quiet bubble. I laughed along, too, not because her joke demanded it, but because it felt impossible not to. There was an ease in her presence, a grace in the way she moved and spoke that drew my attention without ever feeling overbearing. As we talked, our conversation shifted seamlessly from playful teasing to small, ordinary things, the rhythm of daily life, little frustrations, and surprisingly specific observations. I noticed how she sipped her coffee, curling her fingers delicately around the warm cup, the slight crease near her eyes deepening when she smiled. There was an effortless confidence in the way she stood, yet beneath it, a quiet vulnerability peeked through in those fleeting expressions and pauses. I found myself lingering on details that had nothing to do with her words. The tilt of her head when she listened, the way the sunlight painted golden streaks through her hair, the faint sound of her breath as she leaned closer to see a stubborn soap streak on my car. I realized, almost painfully, that my attention was entirely hers. Every casual glance, every little motion became a point of fascination. And yet, she seemed completely unaware of the effect she had, or perhaps she was simply choosing to ignore it, letting the moment exist in its own slow, deliberate rhythm. There was comfort in that, a warmth in knowing that I didn't need to rush, that this connection could exist quietly and naturally. We bent down side by side to inspect a particularly stubborn spot on the car. Our shoulders brushed lightly, a fleeting contact that sent a subtle thrill through me. She didn't pull away, and neither did I, and in that shared silence, there was a sense of understanding. The touch was small, almost accidental, yet it carried the weight of attention and unspoken acknowledgement. Her presence was grounding, yet it made my pulse quicken in a way that was both thrilling and disarming. At some point, we laughed together over a minor soap mishap, a swirl of foam that had splashed too high onto the hood. The sound of our laughter mingled, effortless and unforced, filling the space around us. It was intimate without being intimate, a connection that was felt more than articulated. I noticed the warmth of the sun against our skin, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with soap, the way her eyes crinkled in genuine amusement. By the time we straightened up, the car was almost spotless, but I barely noticed. I was still studying her, silently memorizing the way she moved, the way her voice sounded when she laughed, the way a simple glance could make the mundane feel electric. In that morning moment, I realized something important. This wasn't just a passing interaction. It was a slow, delicate unfolding, a quiet dance of observation, laughter, and subtle attention. And for the first time that day, I felt a deep, almost nervous awareness that something remarkable had started, without fanfare, in the most ordinary of places, under the most ordinary of skies. After the laughter faded, a quiet settled over us, heavier than the soft morning hum of birds or the faint breeze rustling the leaves. I felt a strange shift inside me, a sudden awareness that I was no longer just enjoying the morning or the easy comfort of conversation. I was acutely aware of her, of the way her presence pressed softly against the edges of my focus, making the air feel warmer, heavier, almost electric. I caught myself hesitating mid-motion as I reached for the hose, my fingers pausing in the soapy water. My mind raced, simultaneously enchanted and cautious. This isn't just playful. I feel something. The thought made my chest tighten, a mix of excitement and anxiety. I realized I was hyper-aware of everything about her. The way her shoulders sloped gently, the tilt of her chin as she looked at me, the subtle curve of her lips when she caught me staring. Each detail seemed magnified, impossible to ignore. Yet along with this fascination came a rush of hesitation. She was older, experienced, confident in ways I was not. And here I was, 20-something, suddenly aware of an emotional gravity I wasn't sure I could navigate. I tried to focus on the car, but every time my eyes flipped, I felt my thoughts scatter. I noticed the way her fingers lightly brushed her hair from her face, a tiny, unintentional gesture that made my heart lurch. There was vulnerability there, beneath the calm, polished exterior. For a moment, I wondered if she noticed how acutely I was watching, how conscious I had become of her every movement. I cleared my throat, attempting to shake off the tension that had settled over me like a second layer of skin. Wanting to rinse off the soap now, I asked, my voice slightly uneven. She looked at me, her gaze steady, unflinching, yet not judging. She tilted her head in that familiar, effortless way, the faintest smile tugging at her lips, as if inviting me to step closer without demanding it. That simple gesture made my hesitation worse, and simultaneously more irresistible. I felt the push and pull of wanting to be near her, wanting to bridge the invisible space that had grown between the ordinary task of washing a car and this inexplicable tension. Every rational thought about age gaps, about perception, about what was socially right collided with the more immediate, physical reality. The warmth of the sunlight around her, the gentle sway of her body, the quiet, grounding presence that made my chest tighten and my pulse quicken. I took a deep breath, noticing the faint scent of coffee still lingering around her, the mix of soap and sun on my skin, the soft brush of her sleeve as she reached to steady herself on the hood. This is complicated, I thought, and yet I don't want it to end. For a few suspended moments, we simply stood there, the quiet between us thick with unspoken tension, curiosity, and mutual awareness. I realized that this hesitation, this delicate balancing of desire, caution, and admiration, was as much a part of our connection as laughter or conversation could ever be. And in that quiet, I understood something I hadn't expected, that the uncertainty itself was becoming a strange kind of intimacy, a slow, careful way of acknowledging that we were both aware of the pull between us, without rushing to define or disrupt it. The morning sun shone warmly on our backs, the driveway glistening with soap and water, and I knew that whatever unfolded next would have to respect this fragile, burgeoning connection, a tension that was both terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. By the time we moved to the last stubborn spot on the car, the air between us had shifted. It wasn't just playful teasing or casual conversation anymore. It had grown into something quieter, heavier, and undeniably present. My hands were wet with soap and water, but I was suddenly aware of every brush of our movements, every accidental touch that made my chest tighten. I hesitated, the sponge hovering over the car, and noticed she was leaning just a little closer than before, her focus on the spot blending perfectly with the way her presence filled the space around me. I reached over, sponge in hand, and our fingers brushed. It was brief, almost accidental, but the sensation lingered far longer than it should have. Her skin was warm, softer than I expected, and the light pressure of her touch, as her hand steadied the hood, made my heartbeat spike. I caught my breath, realizing that even something so small could carry weight, that proximity could speak louder than any words we had exchanged. She glanced up at me, eyes steady and calm, a faint smile playing at her lips. It wasn't overt, it wasn't meant to push or rush me, but it was a silent acknowledgement. She had felt the touch too. I wanted to speak, to say something clever or flustered, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I let the moment hang, letting the simple contact and shared space communicate more than language ever could. Leaning closer to examine the soap streak, I felt the faint warmth of her shoulder brush against mine. Just that subtle weight, the sense of her presence pressing softly into mine, made my chest feel both tight and strangely steady. The world narrowed, and for a moment, the only thing that existed was the warmth of the sun, the smell of soap and her faint perfume, and the quiet rhythm of our breaths. I noticed the little things I hadn't before. The way her hair shifted against her neck as she moved, the tiny flecks of her fingers as she balanced herself, the subtle rise and fall of her chest with each inhalation. I could feel the tension in her body, a quiet anticipation mirrored in my own. The brush of skin on skin, the warmth of proximity, the lingering gaze. It was intoxicating in a way I hadn't anticipated. She stepped back just slightly, enough to break the contact, but not the connection. Her smile lingered, a private acknowledgement of the moment we had shared. I exhaled slowly, feeling both relief and a strange ache of longing, the kind that comes from realizing how much a simple touch can matter. There was no rush, no overt declaration, just an understanding that we were here, fully aware of each other, navigating this delicate dance of closeness and restraint. Even a mundane task of washing a car had transformed into something electric, intimate, and quietly thrilling. As we stood side by side, finishing the final strokes, I realized that these subtle touches, the brief hand brushes, the accidental shoulder contact, the proximity of our bodies, had done more than spark desire. They had built trust, awareness, and a fragile, growing intimacy. And I knew, without needing to voice it, that this slow, careful closeness was just the beginning of something that neither of us wanted to rush, but both of us wanted to explore. After finishing the final rinse, we stepped back and leaned against the hood of the car, both of us quiet for a moment, letting the morning settle around us. The driveway smelled faintly of soap and wet asphalt, the sunlight warm on our skin, and the occasional gust of wind stirred her hair across her face. I reached out absent-mindedly, tucking the strand behind her ear. My fingers lingered just a second longer than necessary, and I felt her warmth in a way that made my chest tighten and then slowly ease, like a soft exhale after holding my breath. I swallowed nervously. I don't know why, but this being here with you, it feels different, I admitted, my voice quiet, sincere. It's not just the conversation or the laughter. There's something about just this, you here this morning, it's more. My hands were wet, soap still clinging to my fingers, but I didn't wipe them. I wasn't thinking about the car anymore. I was thinking about her, and the way she made me feel fully present, acutely aware of each small sensation. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes softening. I know, she said simply, and the quiet honesty in her voice made my stomach tighten. It's unexpected, isn't it? The way connection sneaks up on you when you least expect it. Her fingers traced an absent line along the edge of the hood, not touching mine, but her proximity made it feel intimate. I laughed softly, nervously, and ran a hand through my hair. Yeah, unexpected, I echoed, feeling a blush rise to my cheeks. And honestly, I've never felt this, so aware of someone in a simple moment like this. My words stumbled, but I didn't try to smooth them out. I wanted her to know that what I felt was real, that the subtle tension, the quiet pull between us wasn't just in my head. Her smile widened faintly, and for a moment, she was quiet, studying me in that effortless, confident way that seemed to see straight into me. Then she spoke softly, almost a whisper. "It's rare, isn't it? To feel understood without even saying much. To feel drawn to someone, not because of grand gestures, but because of moments like this." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle in my chest. I realized I wasn't just talking about attraction. I was talking about trust, recognition, and something deeper, the kind of connection that begins slowly and quietly, building in the pauses, in the shared laughter, in the fleeting touches that speak volumes. For a long moment, we simply stood there, letting the sun warm our shoulders, letting the morning stretch around us. I noticed the rise and fall of her chest as she breathed, the soft curve of her lips when she glanced at me, the quiet steadiness in her posture that made my pulse skip. It wasn't urgent or desperate. It was gentle, deliberate, and intimate in its own quiet way. "I'm glad you're here," I said finally, my voice soft but certain. "I think I've been waiting for something like this without even knowing it." Her hand hovered near mine for a heartbeat, and though we didn't touch, the space between us was electric, full of unspoken acknowledgement and mutual awareness. It was a moment of vulnerability, yes, but also of trust, a silent agreement that whatever this was, we would navigate it together, slowly, carefully, and fully present in every small sensation and glance that followed. The car gleamed under the late morning sun, every stubborn streak finally gone. Yet somehow the shine on the paint felt secondary to the warmth lingering between us. We stepped back, side by side, letting the morning stretch around us. The world felt quiet, slowed down in the soft light, as if the neighborhood itself had leaned in to watch this delicate, unspoken moment unfold. She shifted slightly, brushing a hand along the hood, and I noticed the faint warmth of her presence against mine. It wasn't bold or overbearing, just a subtle, grounding reminder that she was here, fully present, and aware of me in the same way I was aware of her. The air carried a mix of scents: wet soap from the car, the faint sweetness of coffee lingering on her, and the warmth of sunlight that seemed to wrap us in a private bubble. "Looks perfect," she said softly, a quiet satisfaction in her voice. Her eyes met mine, steady, unhurried, and for a heartbeat, I felt as if the world outside the driveway didn't exist. I smiled, feeling the tension and hesitation that had lingered for days, weeks, or perhaps just this morning, meld away in the ease of the moment. "Yeah, thanks to you," I said, my words catching just slightly. It wasn't just gratitude for pointing out the spot. It was a deeper recognition of her presence, the way she had made this ordinary morning extraordinary. She laughed quietly, a gentle sound that seemed to settle into the space between us, and I realized I wanted to linger here, in this light, with her just a little longer. Without thinking too much, I reached out, letting my fingers brush against hers as if by accident. She didn't pull away. Instead, her hand rested lightly against mine, the contact soft, tentative, yet charged with meaning. I could feel the warmth of her skin, the subtle strength in her grip, and the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat, a steady rhythm that somehow mirrored my own. We stood like that for a moment, letting the silence speak. There was no rush, no urgency, only the lingering acknowledgement of everything that had passed between us. The teasing, the laughter, the quiet confessions, the subtle touches, the hesitation, and finally, the trust that had grown without words. Then, gently, she leaned her head slightly toward my shoulder, just enough to rest the side of her face against me. It was intimate without being forward, a gesture that spoke volumes, of comfort, of connection, of mutual understanding. I felt my arm naturally move around her waist, holding her gently, cautiously, savoring the soft warmth of her presence against mine. The driveway, the car, the ordinary morning, all of it had transformed into something quiet, profound, and deeply human. We pulled back just slightly, faces turned toward one another, lingering in the warmth of shared smiles and glances that held promises without speaking them aloud. I knew that this wasn't the end of our story, but it was the perfect pause, a quiet, golden moment of fulfillment, where the tension had softened into trust and the spark had blossomed into gentle anticipation. As I finally picked up the hose to rinse the last bit of soap from my hands, I realized that the morning had left me with more than a clean car. I had a memory etched in sunlight, in laughter, in warmth, and in subtle touches that would linger long after this day ended. And with a quiet, steady sense of certainty, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it slowly, deliberately, and together, savoring every ordinary, extraordinary moment along the way.